So this week, for this module, we're going to be looking at something that I think can be highly engaging and highly entertaining as well for students and teachers. It's like any other method that we've looked at so far, that most of these methods are going to be highly engaging. None of them can be used all the time, and it's going to require some teacher preparation up front. But I'm going to combine two that they have some similarities, but they're also very distinctively different, and they're not addressed in the textbook. I think that's the only difference that you'll see this week as compared to the other models and methods that we'll look at throughout this 8-week course. And this week we're going to look at gaming in the classroom, or bringing games into the classroom, as well as we're going to look at using simulations. So if you look at this particular slide, this is a game that I brought into a classroom, a methods classroom, that was a compiled group teacher candidates across the curriculum. So math, English language arts, social studies, and again, as with the other methods, I tried to take a pedagogical element and bring it in, teach them the experience, and then we can zoom out and take a look at some of the specifics of how to process this and how it can be utilized as something that students can very much learn from. One thing that you'll notice, certainly more of today, a lot of research about games and using games in the classroom. We've been doing this for a long time, but I think as technology advances and you've got a lot of students who are using games at home, experiencing games at home, and frankly, a lot of that can be a high level of thinking. Problem with it is there's no one there to help them process it, so they could be thinking at a high level and not even realize it. And I think that's where, and I joke around about this oftentimes with teachers, is that Nintendo has figured out how to differentiate better than public education oftentimes differentiates. And I use, for example, a game that my son and I loved to play when he was little. It was Mario Kart Wii. So on the Wii technology, it was a game where you drove these cars and you tried to race all these other different characters, and you're trying to obviously win the race. But the thing about it is, in order to move to the next level, you had to complete a level, and if you drove off the side of the cliff or you crashed or whatever, they would just drop another character in and you can start from where you left off. Unlike what we do in the classroom, there's not a whole lot of second chances or third chances. It's you got to get it perfect the first time, and if you don't, then we're moving on without you. So you can see where sometimes it looks like the gaming industry may have a little bit better grasp of differentiation than even public school teachers. So this is an example, if you'll journey with me through this, of bringing a pedagogical game into the classroom. I'll explain it and give you some maybe ideas of how to set it up in your classroom, and then maybe give some additional ideas at the end, like different games that you can bring in your classroom. So walk with me, if you would, through the journey of this particular game in the classroom. If you'll look at the so to speak rules here, and this is something that I always encourage teachers to do, is have a visual. If you're going to use a game, and of course all games have rules, or you won't be able to understand if you're moving forward or you're even progressing in the game. But one strategy in order to make the game more meaningful and the classroom more efficient is, if you're going to have rules, make sure that they are visually posted. Make sure they're visually posted. I use obviously a PowerPoint slide here. Make sure they're visually posted for the students to be able to reference those rules as they move through the game. Number one, it saves you from having to repeat the rules over and over and over. Two, it helps remind you of, if you forgot to emphasize a specific point, that you can go back and point that out on the visual. I've seen a lot of teachers use games, but they verbally give the rules, and then they wind up spending a lot of time repeating those rules as they go through, and they don't have a visual. Of course, you're always going to have a student, even if the rule is right there in front of them, they'll probably ask you, well, what's the rule about this? And there it is right there in front of them. So there's no guarantee that you won't have to repeat yourself. In this particular game, what I did is I grouped up different teacher candidates into different groups, and I gave them topics that, it's kind of like the old win, lose, or draw game that you may or may not be familiar with on television, to where they had to take the topic. Only one person could draw from the topic, and they had a certain amount of time. And then at the end of that time, the team could provide an overall guess. If that guess were wrong, then the opposing team could come in and provide a guess. And if both teams were wrong, then obviously we'd share with the topic both teams, and we could process and talk it through, whatever that topic is or whatever that means. We'll take a look at the topics here in just a few moments. But the strategy here is obviously letting them kind of experience and play and have fun with different ideas about pedagogy, effective teaching. And, trust me, these were probably 20 to 25-year-old young adults, and when they started working with each other and drawing and trying to guess, they certainly resorted right back to probably, when they were in middle school or high school. They were having a lot of fun. I was certainly having a lot of fun teaching this lesson, and I think that's the point. I didn't want to point that out, obviously, in the middle of teaching it, because that was something that we would process a little bit later. So on the next slide, as I move forward, I'll show you the different topics and the meaning behind why I'm bringing in those types of topics for this particular game. So if you read through the different topics, they all have a different relationship to effective teaching or pedagogy. And these were areas that we had already addressed in either a course that I had taught or a previous course, or maybe even within this particular course that I'm teaching. And what it allowed us to do is to review those different topics. For instance, the first one, teaching is a practice of patience. What does that mean? And so I would give them perhaps a process sheet or even this list of topics usually I would do it after we drew each one and just had an open conversation. But sometimes if I wanted to do it at the end, I would give them, each little snippet of the element that we had drawn earlier, and then we could go back through and process them all together. I really like the idea of giving them a process sheet with which they can think, write, and then discuss. I think you get more meaningful discussions if you sequence it that way. But the point is that I use this game as a tool for review. I also use this game as a tool for high-level conversation so that they can collaborate and get ideas from each other about each one of these topics, because that may not have happened in the past in one of the previous courses, or maybe they know now something from their classroom experiences that they hadn't seen in the previous courses. So it really gave an opportunity for them to have an enriched dialogue, a classroom discussion, while thinking about the previous elements and previous learning that we had in other classes. So this was a really, as I experimented with it, this really wound up being a very effective pedagogical game to use with young adults who are thinking about the teaching career or their teaching profession. Some of the gaming that you can bring into your classroom, obviously depending on your grade level, there's a lot of different elementary level games, spelling games, word games, math games, things that can really engage students. Some of it can be low level thinking, some of it can be very high level thinking. One of the classic games that I always used in social studies when I was teaching high school students, particularly World War II, was Risk. And, having a risk tournament. And that was before we even talked about a lot of the different strategies that were used in the battlefield in World War II. So if you go back and consider the learning styles survey that we looked at in week 1, if you consider those different learning styles, the type 1 learner that wants to experience the learning, well, that's exactly what oftentimes you can do with these games, is you can introduce an experience to that particular type of learner. So a type 1 really connects with the gaming method. And so, yeah, when they do the risk tournament and they battle each other and they understand the rules, after that we had a very vivid discussion of the different strategies on the battlefield during World War II. And at that point, we're talking about the light bulb moments, to where all they had to do is connect it to the prior learning that they had gathered as they played the risk tournament. So games can really serve a very meaningful purpose. Kind of like inquiry, you don't want to say too much up front. Just let them experience it and then process it at the back end. But also like inquiry, you have to do a lot of upfront planning for it to be effective. So if I want to summarize this, and then we'll look at simulations next, is organize your game. Make sure the rules are visible for all students throughout the game. Go over the rules before you start playing, but don't overdo it. Don't overemphasize what they should see or what they should experience. Just let them experience it. And then process it at the end. Process it, like I said, usually I would suggest processing it with some sort of handout where they could think, write, and then discuss. I think that depends on the age group. But frankly, if the students can think, right, and then discuss, you're going to have a much more enriched conversation about it, and an enriched dialogue and collaboration with ideas if they've had a chance to process it before they start discussing it. So, the one thing that I would encourage you to do is just be creative and enjoy these. Don't forget the processing. Otherwise, it just becomes a fun experience that students will leave. They would have had fun, but they may not have learned anything from it. So enjoy this method.